Sword for having me here. I'm very happy to come. Last time I was in Porto was 20 years ago for my Erasmus, so the city changed a lot. This is Llama playing game, this is Llama in Porto, and this is Llama drinking in Porto. But I could not use Llama 3.2 to generate those images because it's forbidden in Europe. So I will use Gemini for this one and ChatGPT for the other one. But I can tell you that I've been lucky enough to train models actually both in DeepMind and in Meta, starting in DeepMind that was Sparrow, Palm, DeepMind for BART for code, Gemini, and Llama 3 since March. And so if now we go to either Gemini.com or AIMeta.com, the languages, the models that you'll be interacting with will be trained by the tools that me and my team developed to use to align them. So what we actually try to when we align the tools, right? We are a lot of people, so this is not in my work, these are people, my collaborators both from DeepMind, from Meta, people that came with me from DeepMind to Meta, my PhD students, my advisors, my collaborators, my postdocs, right? There's a lot of people that came into work. But what we're actually trying to do, we'll try to understand how the alignment works, and then try to analyze it and some kind of build knowledge and make it better. And I will exactly talk about how we make it better in these two models. So these are some papers that we published recently, and I will also present some of the work that is not published yet. So we'll talk about algorithmic alignment. But what is algorithmic alignment, right? So we would like to build, some kind of AI system that we would need very little human interactions to get better, right? Because if you need to spend a lot of things to translate, a lot of things to label, it's not very useful, right? So we'd like to spend as minimal time as possible to align the model to your preferences. And finally, we have the model that's that's open source and it's big enough that it could be used. But what's the main difference between those models and for example, GPT-4? This is some kind of the main pipeline that people use, right? Here, the pre-training, you have your LLM read internet, right? And so it can kind of predict the next word. Then you try but it doesn't talk to you, right? Now you ask it, now you train a little bit to follow instructions, like I want to have a conversation between me and my model, right? So now you can answer, so you can have a debate. But since it's trained on internet is not a very safe place, right? If you look at Reddit, 4chan, and Twitter, it's not the nicest place in the world, and somehow we need to align it to the human preferences. This is kind of the last part where I spend most of my time. But main of the thing that's different between how this is approached in GPT and how it is approached in Gemini or Llama is that alignment. Because at this point, at the second phase, which is called supervised fine-tuning, you have kind of a checkpoint, set of weights. And then in the last phase, what ChatGPT is doing is trying to find one better checkpoint, one checkpoint that human would prefer to all that checkpoint in supervised fine-tuning, right? So, this is a good thing, right? I had something, and I want something that human would prefer even more. But I think, I would say, well, this is very good objective. I don't just want one checkpoint that's better than one particular arbitrarily obtained checkpoint. I want one checkpoint that's better than all other checkpoints possible. I want one model, that's better than GPT-5, Llama 4, Mistral 7, right? And this is what I explained how we achieved. We actually ask to get better objective, better alignment to be compared to any other models possible, and that's what we deliver at the end, right? But we actually also need to taper our expectation. So imagine just 10 years ago in DeepMind, right? We were doing things like AlphaGo and Atari, and we took networks that I'm not allowed to say how big they were, but they're very small, at least relatively to what we have now, and we trained it for the 10 to the 10 steps. And after that, we had something that was able to play, let's say, Tetris or Mario Brothers, right? Big achievement, right? But a lot of steps of training, of reinforcement learning training. Now we have models, that are, more than 400 billion bigger and Google and OpenAI even bigger, and we train him for 10, 100,000 steps, right? Many less steps, right? Much bigger models, many less steps. So we should taper expectation. We actually do be even more genuine how we actually use those steps to get something better. Here we could really stay from tabula rasa, from very beginning, learn it, based on mistakes and get better. Here we don't have that opportunity. We need from beginning doing something reasonable. And so, this is how we actually will change these steps. So I'll kind of explain how we made it happen, that the checkpoint that we get at the end is better than every checkpoint possible. And so one of the big ways of how actually we can think about it, it's very easy to think about this thing, is the ELO model. So we would like to compare two different models, and the way how we do it is do it exactly as we do in chess or tennis. We do ELO scores, or ATP ratings. So for one prompt, we have comparison from two different models or two different outputs, two different completions, and we make them play the game, right? That's what I call it gamification. And so they play the game, somebody wins, somebody loses, and obviously we would like to find the winner. Why we want to find the best tennis player, best chess players of large language models. So this is how it's been done in, for example, ChatGPT. And the way how we do it, we make a lot of matches. We pay people to do those matches. Let's say we pay people to pick which completion is better, and then we train the model. Right, so we maybe take 100,000 of those matches, and we train the model. It's called reward model, that on prompt X and the completion Y, it outputs the ELO score. And then we said, well, we already know how to assign ELO score. We don't need humans anymore, and then we'll be able to assign, ELO score to any prompt and completion, and then we can, based on this reward model, we can just improve the model infinitely. So this is how it works. And all my work in the last 2 years was kind of showing that this is bad and improving based on that. And so the first step, that makes us, improving is that consider not the reward model, not to predict ELO score, but something slightly different. We will take the same network, same number of parameters, same data, but we learn slightly different thing. We learn not predict ELO score, we will learn comparative between two models. So input to this model will be, X, the prompt, first output, second output, and we try to learn the probability that first output is better than the second output, right? So we have a lot of, preferences. We pay people to choose which one between Y and Y prime is better, and we learn, we learn it, with 0, 1s, but this gives us number between 0, 1. This will be already very better, much better for training, because ELO could range, arbitrarily, while the probabilities are between numbers 0, 1. And when it comes to deep learning, having things normalized behaves much better. So now I'm going to kind of convince you that this training is better, right? So I'll just use this to kind of define that once you have such a preference model that you can change which one is better, you can actually formulate what I was trying to formulate in my head, right? So normally you won't have, ChatGPT put one checkpoint that is better. Here, I can use this definition to say I want to have my final, Llama 4, that if I compare it to any other LLMs possible, that if I check any prompts and I compare one from my Llama for every other alternative, then I'll be preferred the most amount of time. And so, while it may look like, I invented something, not at all. This is as old as 1960s, and this is the definition of, Nash equilibrium. I would like to have one model that if I compare to any other model, it's better. It's just that, right? So while there are a few more symbols here, it's the same as Nash equilibrium from 1960s. So we kind of what we want now is not to find something which is best respond to some arbitrary checkpoint. We want to have a Nash equilibrium of all language models, and this is what we go for. And now I'll try to convince you that this is useful. So this is just a simple example that because you can always say like, oh, if you go for one objective versus other objective, you get the same thing. So let's keep that. I'll talk about this over the coffee break. This is just an example that these objectives are indeed different. But I think more important is seeing why this objective is better. So why this ELO score is bad, or why this chess way of playing is bad, and why this Nash equilibrium is better. So imagine, well, a good example will be American elections, right? We just had them. So you have, Republican and Democrat, and let's say you have roughly 50-50 in your data set, but one data point more, is Republican. And then if you try to optimize in the ELO score, chess, tennis, ChatGPT perspective, the best model that optimizes scores, everything is Republican, because the majority is Republican. It's also not very stable, because let's say I get now 2 Democratic points, now everything else is Democratic, because in that objective is the winner takes it all. And it's not even, necessarily absolute majority, it can be relative majority. So you can have like 10 different subgroups, which is quite, normal, You have 10 or 100 different subgroups, and one is slightly better, then the ELO score cater to the preferences of larger subgroup, but even if it's minority. And all the other ones, let's say 90 or 99% other subgroups are ignored. So this is not something that we want, right? Like, for example, it's for when we care about healthcare, right? We would like, it to be catering to all different diverse kind of population, not the one that are slightly more than everything else. So while the Bradley Terry, or how it's called, Alice probably always selects one actions all the time, this Nash, a large language model, will select a mixture of actions. So in this way, it caters to the human preferences. Because if it has to output one action, let's say for Democratic Republican, sometimes it's proposes something which is Democratic, something which is Republican. So that's first. The other thing is limited expressivity, right? So for example, in the ELO score, everybody can be ranked on the table. That's why we invented. So we know, who is better and who is who is worse, and we can just see from top to the down. But like if I play, with for example, tennis with like Joao, and Joao plays with Luis, and Luis plays with me, maybe I'm better than Joao, and Joao is better than Luis, and Luis is better than me. So we have a circle, and there is no score that we can order them, because there's no one that's better, than us, right? So there are kind of circles. And so the thing is that if we go for this ELO score, we created an assumption that it's not true in real life. And don't get me wrong, assumptions are good, right? Usually in physics and in material sciences and other life sciences, we create assumptions so we can study some objective, and we can focus just this one. But here, we're not saying anything. We can fully learn the full distribution of preferences with same amount of data, with same amount of parameters, with same amount of steps. So actually, assuming assumption of ELO scores or this Bradley, we're just shooting each other in the knee. And this is not what we should do. Why we should have assumption if it only can make it worse. And the third thing is the sensitivity to the sampling distribution. The ELO scores actually matters how the data are collected. Imagine that I am the worst chess player in Porto. It could be, right? And Luis is the second worst chess player in Porto. But he would like to have a good ELO score, so he only plays with me. And the ELO scores work in a way that more time he plays with me, his scores gets better. So you can have a best score in the world by refusing to play with Kasparov. So this is how ELO score, right? In reality, this would never happen, right? If you have a large ELO score, people will make you play with a champion. But, this is not how it works in a collection game, right? So, for example, if Luis wants to consider, I'm a best, chess player in the world, he just has Harris score. But he would never go to Lisbon when actually people are better and play with them, for example. Because, he likes to have a large, ELO score. So the thing is that in a comparing, two different completions from a one prompt, we don't even choose what we play. Usually, for one prompt, we take two completions as we have only one comparison, not even multiple. And the problem with ELO score is that like one comparison actually changes order everything else. Why it should not? Because the thing is that, if I play a chess with With Louis, it should only change like kind of confidence interval about who between two of us is better or worse, but not everything else. And so that's why, you know, the sensitivity to gravity distribution, which is the ELO score, makes things worse. But the final, so these are very kind of nice, let's say even theoretical arguments, but the things that really convince, you know, let's say the execs in DeepMind and Meta, then it fits better. So if you just take the simplest machine learning 101 experiment, you know, you take your 70% of training data and you train like ELO score model, which is orange, and then you just score like my, you know, preference reward score, which is blue, you get better results. And so this kind of thing convinced them that we should move towards preference-based score. It's kind of even obvious in hindsight, right? Like you get data as preferences, so you should with preferences know some kind of approximation of preferences. And in the remainder 10 minutes, you know, I'll show you how I actually did that, right? But I think what's even more important to convince you that this is the right objective. Then, you know, like how to actually get it, maybe it's less important, but let's spend some time on it because it actually took me 15 years. And so like this is the story about like the games and the trees and the self-improvement. This is something that I like the most, self-improvement, bootstrapping and self-play. And it was kind of open problem how to actually make this solving Nash equilibria in large spaces work. And so, you know, the thing about solving imperfect information games, you know, you can just think of large language models or just poker. Poker is very good imperfect information because you don't see the opponent's card. Is that we have these kind of optimal algorithms, but they all have to build trees. You know, like in AlphaGo builds the trees, on the chess we building trees. And we know once we build the trees, we just kind of say, you know, all possible, oh, this word, this token, this token, this token, and in the end, which one is better, right? Or, you know, this move, this move, this move, and which one is better. So and we know how to solve it. The problem is that when the space is 10 to the 1,000, which is, for example, in bigger games such as Stratego, or in like large version models when you can have infinite size of possible text, you know, you cannot build trees because you cannot build trees that are so long. However, in like deep learning or deep reinforcement learning, we found a way how to scale those things. You know, and this is just like a very simple thing called replay buffer, right? So on one side we have TPUs or GPUs. When we compare two things, like for example in Atari we play the games, or in like in large language model we do forward passes and we generate trajectories. And then on the other side, usually CPUs, we take stuff from the replay buffer, we improve the model, you know, the policy, and then we distribute this policy on our, you know, 10 or 100,000 TPUs, and then we improve it, right? So this is how we manage to scale. But we never build the trees. We only work with the replay buffer. And so the open problem is how you can solve the large language games with just replay buffer and never build a tree. And so this is something, you know, that had to, you know, be the very kind of intricate recipe. We need to have a right node estimate, a right regularizer, right balancing of the trajectories, and some kind of magic sauce. So it started in 2014 with some of my prior research on implicit exploration, how to explore new possibilities without actually completely trying them. And it amounts to just very simple change in equation. I'll talk about it over the coffee if somebody's interested. But there are a lot of people that build on it, right? Somebody had to invent dilated entropy, Monte Carlo tree surfers, or method. And in 2021, we thought we got close to the solution, but we were just off in the speed of conversion. We were not as fast as possible. So we got back to work, and we kind of figure out how to estimate some of the guarantees or some of the, you know, optimal probabilities of opponent without constructing the tree. And finally, in 2023, we had this solution. We won the best prize in ICML, and then we realized that this objective function is exactly the objective functions we need to solve when we're solving Nash LLMs for large language models. So I have 5 minutes, and so I can like present, the final solution that we obtain, right? So it's actually, at the end, very simple. First, we train this preference model. We have pairs X or triplets X, like prompt X, one option, second option, we learn this model, and then we compute Nash equilibrium. Pretty simple, right? And so, if you compare it to things like the, ChatGPT, which is trained with PPO or equivalent DPO, is some kind of, gradient descent here. It's called policy gradient. We take the gradient of logarithm and some kind of reward, the ELO scores. And instead, we would like to just compute Nash equilibrium. And so we have a lot of, unexpected benefits from doing that, because we can do it faster, and we can even converge in distribution. And so what we're not solving somehow is addressing reward hacking. Because oftentimes, what you need to do, like if your model is kind of far enough, if you're improving the model, but it gets far enough from original data, then it starts to be really bad in evaluating how good the answers are. And that's a typical thing, that you can have very high score, but what comes with the model is like pizza, 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 pizza. Because they really like that kind of sentence. For some reason, if you add a lot of pizzas, reward models they think this is very good. Or like a lot of smileys are also very good. So, but the way how we actually fix that, if we compare, like, let's say, Llama 4 with Mistral large, we will say, well, let's just take the comparison that it is, and if the data you're comparing with far enough is kind of discounting. If you're better than some model, but on the data that I don't really understand, don't take me that seriously. And this is nice, because under this we have this kind of reward hacking avoidance for free. And the other thing that we kind of looked at, it was how Nash solved the problem. Because why did we even invent new algorithms if Nash did it for us, right? So this is what Nash did in the 60s. He constructed this model, and to compute, the Nash equilibrium, he did it this way. In the first way, he started from base policy, which is like SFT, so after the second fine-tuning phase, find a preferred model. So this is actually what ChatGPT does. So first step of Nash equilibrium solving is actually do what ChatGPT does. Find the policy that's preferred to this one. Well, then you take the original policy, the one that you found, so the second model, and you found the second model, you found the third model, so the pi 2, that's better than 2. Then you put all 3 together, that's something that's better than 3. Well, then you see, and after all, you have the final model, and the average of them is the best possible solution. And this worked very well for Nash. And why it doesn't work for us is because, let's say, all these models are 400 or 500 billion parameters, and every step I would have to store multiple 400 billion parameter models. So the quest for us was how to actually kind of execute Nash algorithm without storing every time step, 500 billion parameter models. And so this is kind of our algorithm, which is called Nash mirror descent, based on the open problem we solved. And in every step, we somehow, do the mirror descent step, which is typical case of algorithm of Nemirovsky, trying to make sure we don't go far from the previous step. This is also very tricky, because we will need to solve this maximization problem every time step, very difficult. So we have kind of real-life approximation of it, that we only do one step a little bit, and we don't go far from the delusion. What is nice about this formulation is very similar to what current RLHM is doing, so it doesn't need to invent a new infrastructure. So only we replace, this ELO model with our new model. We save a lot of parameters because we don't need, a variance reduction. What is also different? What is one thing that we need to do differently? We need to kind of construct this mixture of all other policies. So what we do at the end, we start with a model, supervised fine-tuning. We find one that's better than us. Then we mix those models. 20% of this, 80% of this, and it represents multiple models. We mix the weights. We do average of the weights. Then we find one is better than one. Then we mix the weights. Find the one that's better than one. Mix the weights, and we never need to store more and more for a 5e model. And that way we kind of execute Nash algorithms with the guarantees that we have. What is more important is that we'll outperform on the status method. So because there were nobody's doing summarization tasks, so here I picked a summarization task, we still care. And you can see, like, so this is all possible models, or all possible algorithms to fine-tune models, compared with the same ones, right? So if you compare, one algorithm with the other, on diagonal you have 50%. So this is how one is preferred to the other, right? So if we go for like RLHF solutions, or like the kind of ChatGPT solution, you start with supervised fine-tuning, and if you do RLHF fine-tuning, the humans would prefer 99% to original. Makes sense, it was optimized for it. And if you go for like some our solution, which is this one, it's slightly worse. So we said, well, compared to that by checkpoint, you're not as better as RLHF checkpoint. But if you compare this RL checkpoint with every other model, sometimes it's better. Well, this was the optimized one, but it was not optimized for all these other ones. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. While our thing is always better, which is what we wanted, right? We wanted that if you compare our model to every other model, it will be always better. And this is what we achieved. And so that's why, the models that we come from this Nash equilibrium are better prepared for, interacting with multiple operations. So I have 30 seconds, so I'll stop here, and thank you very much.
So we have time for one question, and then the other questions with Michal will happen with coffee and water. So who has questions? Don't be shy. I wish I could do, but I am low in the rating of understanding this, so I cannot do any questions. Yeah, we have a question. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for your talk. I am curious about how this training with Nash equilibrium contributes to ensuring that you are not forgetting what you've trained before the reinforcement learning step. Mm-hmm. And my second question is, how does that parallelize with, for example, in my case, I want to fine-tune a model to my certain task that I'm trying to perform. How can I ensure that I am not regressing what you've trained in the previous step?
Sure, yeah. So of course, this is potential worry that you're forgetting what you were doing before, because like for example, because one option what you could do is do something like a self-play, right? Always kind of generate two different outputs from the same model and pick the one that's better, and using Nash equilibrium on yourself, which is like AlphaGo doing. But for which we do, which is slightly different, for which we have guarantees, that we always mix something from the previous, not from the previous step, but from original step. So we always remember what we started with, and we always take 20, 15, 35% of those mixtures. So mixing this every time step, we assure that you're not forgetting, because you're always mixing those original ways. So this is the first question. And second question is like how to actually make sure. So here, the only thing that's changed is practically somehow, from the data perspective, that you train, different reward model. So like before you would train the reward model, for a particular task. Now you take exactly the same data, you already collected, you don't need to collect anything more. You just train this kind of preference model to give you kind of preferences between the two different outputs, right? Like, you use the same data that would use for your reward model, but instead, you actually train it to give you the number 0, 1, which between two is preferred, right? And so the other thing that you could say, you didn't ask the third question, because now in last 6 months or 1 year, we already have methods like DPL that actually don't need to even train reward models. And so for that, and this is the part that I completely skipped, we have our version called IPL, which is, for example, how like Gemini 2 is trained, that actually you can actually do this without explicitly training that preference model. So you implicitly train it, but in reality, you don't even have it. Directly make your changes as you would have it. So this is actually save a lot of trouble with having extra model in the place.
Thank you, Michal. We will break for the coffee break now, and we will come back right in 20 minutes. So be here, and thank you so much. See you in a minute.